Good day everyone. I am Cristina Rondena and I will be discussing everything about the women's rights and transnational solidarity. There are numerous transnational networks and organizations campaigning on issues affecting women, and their number and influence have grown as a result of the new wave of feminism in 1970s. However, a lot of people are not aware that the women's group already existed before the Second World War, which is why this discussion will take us back to the foreword of feminism. As we all know, women didn't possess any legal and human rights in many aspects in the society. There are people who believe that we do not need feminism today, but nothing could be further from the truth. Women have struggled for equality and against oppression for centuries, such as unequal access to education. They should be obedient to their husbands at any time. They are prevented from owning property, they had no rights to vote, and they also received unequal rights upon divorce. So the first wave of feminism started in the late 1800 to early 1900. The first wave of feminism was called the Women's Suffrage and the Seneca Falls Convention. So the Seneca Falls Convention was originally known as the Women's Rights Convention. The meeting was held from July 19 to 20, 1848 at the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York. It was hosted by Elizabeth Clinton, Lucretia Mott, Mary M. Clintock, Martha Coffin Wright, and Jane Hunt, wherein they boldly proclaimed in their now famous Declaration of Sentiments, wherein they fought for the social, civil, and religious rights of women. So, despite scarce publicity, 300 people, mostly area residents, showed up. So, on the first day, only women were allowed to attend, but on the second day, it was also open to men and women combined. So, originally, feminism started on the objective of claiming that women should have a right to vote. Also, they are claiming for equal property rights, especially after divorce. 2 weeks later, exactly on August 2, 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention reconvened on the First Unitarian Church at Rochester, New York, to reaffirm the movement's goals with a larger audience. So in 1893, New Zealand became the first country to give women the right to vote on a national level, followed by Finland in 1906, Russia in 1917, and Germany and UK in 1918. So in 1920, thanks largely to the work of suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Catt, the 90th Amendment passed. Women finally earned the right to vote. The United Nations commitment to the advancement of women began with the signing of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco in 1948. So initially, the Commission focused only on the legal measures to protect the human rights of women and awareness rising on the status and situation of women all around the world. So this movement grew to spread all around the world, and thanks to the efforts of everyone involved in the struggle, today's women's suffrage is a right under the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which was passed on 1979, which also was ratified by 78 countries by the end of the decade. So let us talk about the Charter of the United Nations. It is the foundational treaty of the UN, an intergovernmental organization, which was drafted on August 14, 1941, signed on June 26, 1945, and was also effective on October 24, 1945. Why was the UN Charter created in the first place? So it is to maintain international peace and security, promote social progress and better standards of life, strengthen international law, and promote the expansion of human rights. The UN's membership has grown from the original 51 member states in the 1945 to the current 193 member states. So the UN Charter have that huge number of members, diba? So their involvement on the feminist movement made everything possible. Like if they passed a bill concerning feminism, many countries would follow its path because mostly is the members is developing countries. So the Article 13, which was highlighted in the UN Charter in terms of feminism, states that the General Assembly shall initiate studies and make recommendation for the purpose of promoting international cooperation in the economic, the social, cultural, educational, health risk, and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as race, sex, language, or religion. So not only this Article 13 highlighted the feminist movement, it also broke the barrier. Men often think na mas stronger sila sa women that time, and also racial issues. Kay we have the Black American and the White American, so there was also a discrimination. The barriers of language grew because countries have their own culture, they have their own daily lives, they have their own principles, perspective on also the religion. Everyone had their own idea of life. So this Article 13 not only supported feminism, so but also all problems around the world. So the second wave of feminism started in 1960s to 1980s. So as I've said earlier, the end part of feminism, like the first wave of feminism, was late 1900, diba? Whereas the starting point of the second wave was the 1960s. So there was a huge gap, obviously, between the first wave and second wave. So what happened between those time? Why did the second wave did not immediately start? And what was the turning point of the ending? Like, how did people knew na and the nasa sa first wave feminism, the starting point na sa second feminism, diba? So this will take us back to the topic of the Second World War. So the Second World War, as we all know, was a huge part of the history. So the Second World War started because of United Nations. It was formerly known as Allies. The United Nations composed of US, UK, the Soviet Union, and China, which was one of, like, they are all part of the developing countries, and Soviet Union was a huge organization. When the United Nations oppressed Axis power, the Nazi Germany, the Imperial Japan, and the Fascist Italy, which was called the Axis power, when those two collided, it brought everyone to war. The Second World War happened in 1939 to 1945. So as men are needed and was sent to camp bases for the war, you will find large areas of workspaces, industries, everyday labor unoccupied where men are supposed to do it. So economically, politically, socially, there is a suddenly gaping need for workers at any kind, including women. So professions that were considered unavailable for women were considered a need. But let's make it clear, this was not about the women's empowerment, but it was a national duty of women to make the country running with the absence of men. But as the war ended, government-sponsored propaganda encouraged women to return to home. That means women were ordered to return to home. So it was a very absurd idea in the first place. So because women proved something, stopping was never an option. Like, they already had a taste of what it's like to be a part of the society. So the second wave of feminism was called the women's liberation. Some achievements was the passing of the Equal Rights Amendment, which sought legal equality for women and banned a discrimination on the basis of sex. It was passed at Congress in 1972. So 1 year later, feminists celebrated a Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade, the landmark ruling that guaranteed a woman's right to choose an abortion. So by the mid-1960s, the Commission had begun to address women's role in economic and social development, where delegates from developing countries drew attention in particular to the situation of women in rural areas and the need to enhance their contribution and address their priorities and needs. The second wave of feminism brought the issue on women's right on their own bodies, their reproductive organs. So let us talk about the Nairobi Convention. So it was first signed in 1985 and entered into force in 1996. The program aims to address the accelerating degradation of the world's ocean and coastal areas through the sustainable management and the use of the marine and coastal environment. It does this by engaging countries that share the Western Indian Oceans to protect their shared marine environment, which was attended by 15,000 women from 150 countries. So let us move on the third wave of feminism, which questioned on who benefit from the feminist movement. So the third wave of feminism can be characterized by an increased awareness of overlapping categories such as race, class, gender, and sexual orientation. More emphasis was also placed on racial issues, including the status of women in other parts of the world. So why was this issue brought up in the third wave of feminism? So, di ba, ang first wave of feminism started American country, white country. So the third wave of feminism questioned if how far would the boundary of feminism or women's rights be brought to. So the third wave of feminism actively uses media and pop culture to promote its ideas and to run activities, for example, by publishing blogs or e-zines. So this time, like 2012, although technology was not advanced enough, it had the capability to spread awareness on what is feminist movement. So let us move on the fourth wave of feminism. Fourth wave of feminism questioned the intersectionality. So the fourth wave of feminism continues to reckon with intersectionality. Critics of white feminism, which ignores the unique struggles of women of color. It exposes how non-white feminists and ideas have been and continue to be suppressed. So trans rights are a big part of the conversation too. Feminist has often been an unwelcoming and hostile place for trans women and others who object the gender binary. So let us move on to the three main feminist approaches. The first one is the liberal feminism, also called the mainstream feminism. It is the main branch of feminism defined by its focus on achieving gender equality through political and legal reform within the framework of liberal democracy. The second one is the socialist feminism. It was a response to mainstream radical feminism, particularly the second wave of feminism, which focused on the economic injustices related to gender-based oppression. So the socialist feminism was used in the second wave of feminism. The third one is the radical feminism. It is a perspective within feminism that calls for a radical reordering of society in which male supremacy is eliminated in all social and economic contexts, while recognizing that women's experiences are also affected by other social divisions such as the race, the class, and the sexual orientation. This struggle includes opposing the sexual objectification of women, the raising public awareness about such issues as rape and violence against women, the challenging the concepts of gender roles, and challenging what radical feminists see as a racialized and gendered capitalism that characterizes the United States and many other countries. For the whole topic, I only have one question. So, do you believe trans women should have the same right as women? Kaya diba, feminist movement started on fighting for women's right because the opposition of the men. I have nothing against trans women. I agree that they should be treated equal in the society, but because they are men by blood and by birth, should they have the same rights as women? Or should they just be entitled to human rights? Okay, that would be all. Thank you.